Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started with our next topic here of eliminating the pollution of wrong behavior and observances, mastering moral conduct, and elimination of superstition. Okay, so let me just switch over to some visual aids for all of our people online. Welcome to all of you guys. Okay, so this next pollution, this is the third fetter, wrong behavior and observances. I'm going to explain to you what it is, the symptoms, how to eliminate it, and how to know that we've actually eliminated it. Okay, oops, someone okay? Yeah, all right. I hear laughing, so you must be okay. All right. So what is wrong behavior and observances? There's actually two sides to this fetter, and they're both somewhat different, but they're combined here. So what wrong behavior and observances is where there's unwholesome moral conduct in terms of the way you interact with other beings. And there's this belief in the mind that rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship is going to somehow lead to enlightenment or improvement to the condition of the mind. So this is what that fetter is, where there's just a certain amount of unwise moral conduct. And that's from, again, the lack of wisdom. That's what dependent origination helps you to be able to see, that there's just a lack of wisdom in the mind about good, wise moral conduct that leads to wholesome results. This is the lack of wisdom of the natural law of karma. So it always comes back to a lack of wisdom, but where that can be seen is in one's moral conduct, that the moral conduct becomes unwise. And then there's this belief that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship is going to help someone to be able to get to enlightenment. So that's what this fetter is. The symptoms of this is that an individual will not be practicing right speech, right action, and right livelihood from the Eightfold Path. For those of you guys that were here on Tuesday, you learned in the morning what is right speech, right action, right livelihood. This is where the Buddha is teaching you the wisdom of the natural law of karma. So, for example, right speech is where the Buddha is teaching you to eliminate lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech, because all those things are based in craving, right? The mind's longing, yearning. That's why it's lying, because the mind wants something, and if it thinks that if it tells the truth, that it won't get what it wants, right? And then when there's slander, the mind thinks that I want to look good in front of other people, so I'm going to diminish others in order for me to look good. Or the harsh speech, that's because there's a craving, there's a longing, there's a yearning in the mind. And now the mind thinks I can fear this other being into doing things my way. So I'm going to be hostile and bitter and aggressive with that person. And then there's that frivolous speech where the mind's just like yada, 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 yada. Just endless talking, pointless talking, no purpose, no benefit. There's an underlying craving there. So the Buddha's Eightfold Path is teaching you to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, that longing, yearning, because anytime you make decisions through craving, anger, or ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality, it's going to produce unwholesome results. So this unwholesome moral conduct around speech, it's going to produce unwholesome results in your day-to-day life. When you're lying, having slander, harsh speech, or frivolous speech, it's going to produce unwholesome results. And I gave you guys examples of that, right? Like when you're lying, the mind's going to be lying, and people are going to discover those lies. They're going to see you as undependable, unreliable, and untrustworthy. And now when you're maybe at a job or a career, and it's time for the boss to staff some kind of project, they're going to overlook you because they can't rely on you. You're not dependable. So that's your unwholesome karma, that you're not going to see improvement in your personal, professional relationships, because this person who's lying people are going to discover those lies, and now they're not going to see you as dependable and reliable. Same thing with slander. If you're gossiping and slandering people, the unwholesome results of this is that at the very height of this, you can be murdered, right? There's people in the world that have been murdered for slandering and gossiping, right? Remember, the Buddha's not teaching you the way the world should be. He's teaching you the way the world is. He's showing you these natural laws. At the very least, with gossip and slander, people are going to be gossiping and slandering about you if you go around gossiping and slandering, because you're going to get these people used to gossiping and slandering. So now when you're away and you have your back turned, they're going to be gossiping and slandering about you. So that's why you like to go clean that up with people. If you're choosing to gossip and slander, you'd like to move away from that and stop doing that and no longer do that. And then the same thing with the harsh speech. If you're hostile and harsh and bitter with people, not paying attention to your tone, tempo, and word choice, then people are going to be harsh and bitter and hostile with you too. That's the way that the natural law of karma works, that whatever you put out, it's going to come back to you. And you can see in the relationships where you're harsh and hostile and bitter, and you're speaking that way with people, you can see in those relationships, those people speak to you in exactly the same way. So if you're going to clean up your mind and clean up your life, you're going to need to clean up your decision-making around your moral conduct. So the same thing with frivolous speech. If you are out there speaking with frivolous speech, then people get used to you being, just yada, 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 yada all the time. You're going to be uninfluential. People are just going to tune you out. They're going to be disinterested in associating with you. They're just not going to be interested in even spending time with you because it's not a conversation. It's more like this person is broadcasting to other people. So when we talk about getting rid of wrong behavior here in the fetters, it's this first level of the Eightfold Path, where in right speech, it's eliminating lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. There are deeper teachings on right speech, like the 5 factors of well-spoken speech. I shared that with you guys. To speak at the proper time, what you say is true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. And there's even teachings beyond that as well. But those aren't included in this particular fetter. In order to eliminate this fetter, you need to eliminate the lying, slander, harsh speech, and frivolous speech. And then having eliminated this fetter and continuing to practice from the first, second, and third stage of enlightenment, you're going to be now working to implement the 5 factors of well-spoken speech and all the other aspects of speech. But to get rid of this fetter, you need to eliminate that first level in speech. And then the same thing with right action, that you need to eliminate the killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct, because as long as you're doing those types of things, you're causing harm. And it's the 5 precepts that's explaining to you how to practice those. That's why I taught those as part of this retreat, because in the Eightfold Path itself, he's just giving you very basic understanding of that, but it's the 5 precepts that really help you to expand that. Because remember, he's not teaching you to preserve all life at all costs. He's teaching you to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. And then remember, we talked about stealing. We talked about, if there's somebody who's their arm is cut, they're bleeding profusely, and you need to grab this fabric off of someone's porch to be able to save that person's life. Maybe you choose to do that. But then afterwards, once they're in the ambulance and headed to the hospital, maybe you go back and kind of talk with that neighbor and make sure that they understand that you would like to replace this fabric, right? So we talked about these different things. We also talked about sexual misconduct, unchastity, and having sex with minors, and having forcible sex where you're forcing someone to have sex, like rape, or having sex outside of relationships. This is all causing harm. So we went into a lot of detail about that, but that's right action. Someone who has wrong behavior and observances, they won't be practicing right speech. They won't be practicing right action. They'll be doing these kinds of things. And then there's that right livelihood. What a livelihood is how you choose to sustain your life. And if you choose to sustain your life off of causing harm to other beings, that harm is going to come back to you. So the Buddha gives you those 5 livelihoods that would be harmful, which are business and weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, and poisons. And you need to be able to look at those and be able to independently verify and see that, yes, those cause harm. And then he taught you about how to perform your livelihood, that you're eliminating scheming, flattering, hinting, belittling, and pursuing gain with gain. And I walked you guys through that and gave you all different kinds of examples. So an individual who has wrong behavior and observances, they're going to be doing those kinds of things. They're going to be doing the scheming, the flattering, hinting, belittling, and pursuing gain with gain. So this is the wrong behavior part. That individual is going to be doing these types of things, and they're going to be experiencing unwholesome karma as a result. And oftentimes what people do is they blame it on other people, and they just don't understand. It all comes back to the lack of wisdom, the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality. Or people will say it's good luck or bad luck when they're experiencing these unwholesome results, or it's destiny or it's fate, or some people will blame it on God or some entity called the universe, or they'll blame it on other people. But what they don't understand is it's their own decisions around their moral conduct with speech, actions, and livelihood that are leading to those unwholesome results in their life. So with this wrong behavior, you'll just continue continue to receive harm coming back to you over and over and over again. So how can you get to a peaceful and joyful mind and a peaceful and joyful life when you keep experiencing all this harm coming back to you over and over and over and over and over again? So in order to get to this first stage of enlightenment, you're going to need to clean up your moral conduct to the level that you see in the Eightfold Path. And then there's more work to do beyond that. But that first level in the Eightfold Path is what you would like to be able to clean up to get to this first stage of enlightenment, where you'll see a significant decrease in your discontentedness. What wrong observances is like I said up here, where an individual thinks that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship is going to help them to create some kind of spiritual development or enhancement to their mind or enlightenment. So the symptoms of this is that the mind's going to consider that rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship is going to actually be required or needed in order to have spiritual development. And by the time you eliminate wrong observances, you'll know that that's not the truth. If you choose to do those things, that's a whole separate question. We can talk about that in a moment. But your mind will know that these things are not leading to improvement, because you'll understand what the number one problem is in the mind through dependent origination. You'll know what is the number one problem. Okay. So any questions on what wrong behavior and observances is or the symptoms of it? Okay. So now to talk about how to eliminate this. The way that you eliminate wrong behavior is through a well-developed practice of the Eightfold Path, learning and practicing the moral conduct of right speech, right action, right livelihood. That's why you need to memorize the Eightfold Path, not just the words, but understand how to actually practice it in day-to-day life. So the way that you eliminate this is not through the intellectual learning of right speech, right action, right livelihood. You need to do that, yes, but the way you eliminate this is through the practice. You will see for an extended period of time that your mind will be practicing this right speech, right action, right livelihood. So you need to learn it intellectually first, but then you need to reflect on it to verify that it's true. And you can do that. And I've helped you to be able to see how to do that. And then you need to practice it. And that's where, as you're practicing it, this good, wholesome moral conduct, you're going to see significant improvement. And then to eliminate wrong observances, you need to eliminate the belief that rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship is going to lead to enlightenment, that it's required in order to lead to enlightenment. You need to be able to see the truth behind this of what's really needed in order to be able to experience enlightenment. And that comes through the Eightfold Path, and dependent origination helps you to be able to see what the number one problem is. So it's this Eightfold Path that's helping you to be able to clean up that moral conduct. That's why you need to memorize this. And I offered you guys a study guide. If you would like a study guide, you can send me a message and I'll email you back, or send it through Messenger, whatever it is that you send me a message in. I have this little study guide that'll help you to study this and memorize it. So if you'd like that, just send me a message and I will help you by sending that to you. So let's talk for a moment about the difference between belief and wisdom, because this is what's going to help you to eliminate the wrong observance as part of this fetter. What belief is that the mind doesn't understand what's true or false, or right or wrong. It's just believing something. And then the mind could be clinging to a certain perception of the way things seem to be without actually truly understanding the truth. So with belief, the mind is holding on to an opinion or view that may or may not even be true, and it hasn't independently verified whether it is true or not. It's just believing this thing. So if you base your decision making about your life and your growth and development in this life in belief, then you're basing your decisions on things that aren't confirmed, that aren't necessarily wisdom. In order to be able to get to the point where you're making 100% wise decisions, you need to base all your decisions in truth. So if you're basing a decision based on belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it because somebody convinced you to believe it, or you convinced yourself to believe it. So you need to get away from belief and be able to independently verify things that you're doing, so that now you're making 100% wise decisions. And that's where you're able to cultivate wisdom, because what wisdom is something that you've independently verified. It's a certain teaching that you've learned, and you can go off on your own and independently verify that. And other people can go off and independently verify it too. It's not based on a belief. So there needs to be confirmation in each individual thing that you've learned, that way you can have 100% confidence in what it is that you've learned. Have any of you guys ever grown up with the belief in Santa Claus? How many of you guys have grown up with the belief in Santa Claus? Okay, a fair number of you guys. Okay, so you guys know that at one point we believed in Santa Claus. And when we saw presents under the tree, it was like, whoa, Santa Claus was here. Oh, this was so great, right? And we believed that for a long time. And we might have even gone to the mall, or we might have gone to other venues where there was this big, oversized gentleman wearing a red suit and a beard and a hat. And we were like, that's Santa Claus. He came from the North Pole. Where's his reindeer, right? And we're looking around for these things. We had a lot of belief in this particular thing. But at some point, we learned the truth. We learned the truth that Santa Claus doesn't exist. I don't know how it happened for you guys, but I was 8 years old. I woke up, I came downstairs on Christmas morning, and my sister said, David, there's no such thing as Santa Claus. I was like, what? What are you talking about? She was like, I saw mom and dad eating the cookies and drinking the milk last night. There's no such thing as Santa Claus. And I was crushed. I was absolutely crushed, right? Here's my parents lying to me at 8 years old. I find this out, right? So that's one of the problems with belief, right? Is it gets crushed, right? So when you found out that there was no such thing as Santa Claus, maybe you were crushed too, right? You felt like you had been lied to all these years. But nonetheless, at this point, you know the truth. You know with wisdom, with 100% certainty that Santa Claus does not exist. So no matter how many Christmas carols you hear that include Santa Claus, no matter how many big, fat, jolly people you see walking through the mall with red suit and a white beard, you know that that's not Santa Claus. Nobody can ever shake you off of that truth, because you know with 100% truth that there's no such thing as Santa Claus, because you verified that for yourself, right? That's wisdom. And now your mind is unshakable on that topic. Well, there's various topics that the Buddha taught that you need to get to that same point where you have wisdom with 100% certainty and you verified it and your mind is now unshakable, right? That's what you're doing with things like the Four Noble Truths, that you're learning it, yes, investigating and examining it. You're reflecting on it to verify it, but then you practice it and you get to the point where your mind is unshakable on that truth because you verified it. The same thing with this moral conduct and all the other teachings of the Buddha, whether it's meditation or Eightfold Path or 5 precepts or any of these other things. Even the cycle of rebirth, eventually you'll get to the point where your mind is unshakable, where you know the truth with 100% certainty. That's why I can sit here and look everyone in the eyes and I can say, this works. I know that this works with 100% certainty because my mind has investigated it, I've reflected on it to verify it, and I've practiced it and I see the results. Right? So you need to get to that point with each individual aspect of the teachings of the Buddha. That's what's going to help you to be able to awaken to this enlightened mental state, is getting to wisdom, right? So it's not just an intellectual pursuit. That's not wisdom yet. When we were children, we all learned at some point or another from somebody in our family, for example, that it's unwise to use drugs and alcohol. We understood that intellectually, that it was unwise to use drugs and alcohol. But we didn't function through wisdom. We didn't have wisdom at that point. All we had was intellectual understanding. And we might have even reflected and realized that, yeah, it's probably unwise to use drugs and alcohol. But our decisions were still to use drugs and alcohol because we lacked wisdom. We were still putting this poison into the body, and it was still affecting our mind because all we had was intellectual understanding. We didn't have wisdom yet because we weren't making our decisions through that intellectual understanding. So when you get to wisdom, your mind will be 100% unshakable on that wisdom, and you'll be making decisions through that wisdom. That's what it means to have wisdom. With belief, you don't know what's true or false. And as you're making decisions, you'll make decisions based on that belief, and now you'll be making unwise decisions, and it'll produce unwholesome results. So this is the difference between belief and wisdom. You need to get to wisdom. You're not interested in believing something. So if somebody says, yeah, I'm going to sprinkle this water on you, and now it's going to help you become a better person. Okay, well, how can we independently verify that? Have you ever been to those places where they sprinkle water on you or tie a wrist on your string? Or maybe there's a wafer that you put on your tongue, or maybe there's some kind of wine or fruit drink that you drink. Did it improve the condition of your mind? Did it improve the condition of your life? Did it help you eliminate anger and sadness and frustration and all these other things? You need to be able to look at that, because that's your independent proof of whether or not those things worked or not. So you need to get to this wisdom where you can see the truth. So there's these questions that I'm going to ask you, and you might even be able to eliminate this wrong observances part here today. So what is the number one and primary problem that is keeping the mind in the unenlightened state and in the cycle of rebirth? What's the number one problem that the unenlightened mind is plagued with? Ignorance, the unknowing of true reality, right? The mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. What solves this problem? What solves ignorance or the unknowing of true reality? What's the solution? You guys are hitting all around it. I heard something. The cultivation of what? Wisdom, right? You guys were saying all the details, but the cultivation of wisdom, right? That's what's going to solve this. That's what antidotes the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, right? How do rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship help a practitioner to transform this problem? It doesn't, right? So what rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship help a practitioner to cultivate wisdom? Does me sprinkling water on you help you cultivate wisdom? No, it doesn't. Tying strings on your wrist, does that help you cultivate wisdom? That's actually just the opposite. That's staying in the delusion. That's staying in the confusion, right? So you need to be able to see that the ultimate problem is that the mind lacks wisdom. It has this ignorance or unknowing of true reality, this confusion and delusion. And there's no amount of sprinkling water on you or any of these other rituals or ceremonies that can help you cultivate wisdom. It's not possible. These kinds of things were going on during the lifetime of the Buddha too. There were individuals referred to as Brahmin. Today we might call these people Hindu priests, where in this particular society there was a certain caste system in place, that if you were born into this family, about 15% of society, they were considered to be Brahmin and holy people. And if you were born into this family, you were immediately considered to be a holy person. And now these people were responsible for doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer for everybody else. We were all taught that we can't improve our life. The only way to improve our life is to go to this person, this Brahmin, pay them money, and they were going to do rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship on our behalf, and then our life was going to get better. So if you were having trouble with your life partner, or your children, or you were sick or ill, you would go to this Brahmin, pay them some money, and then they would do some rituals and ceremonies, and you were supposed to go home and your life was going to get better. Well, now when your life wasn't getting better, because that's not what produces improvement in your life, you would then have more struggles, and you would come back and say, hey, look, the ceremony that you did last time didn't work. I'm still having trouble with my husband or my wife or my children. Oh, that's another ceremony that I need to do, and that's going to be more expensive to do that one. So now it bred corruption, that more and more and more people were being led to believe that it was rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and things like this that were going to lead to improvement. So there was this group of people that were doing these kinds of things. And the Buddha knew this, and he saw this, and he knew that this isn't what leads to improvement. If you're going to improve your relationships, if you're going to improve the way your mind's functioning, you need to be able to cultivate wisdom. There's no amount of rituals and ceremonies that is going to help you to make better decisions in your relationships. It's just not going to happen. So if you understand the number one problem is the lack of wisdom, then the number one solution is to cultivate this wisdom, right? And there's no amount of smoke or incense or wafers or drinking of this or sprinkling of that that's going to help you to cultivate wisdom, right? So oftentimes people have already done a lot of these things before they've ever come to study with me, and they know that I don't do these things. So oftentimes this wrong observances one is actually eliminated before people even come to study with me. They already know that those things don't work. But sometimes there's people here that are doing those things. And if you're doing those things, that's fine. That's a choice for you to make. I'm not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't do in your life. I'm just helping you to be able to see that these rituals and ceremonies don't lead to the improvement to the condition of your mind in your life because it's not helping you to cultivate wisdom. In fact, as you are spending time with your families and stuff like this, you might have family members that are into these kinds of things. Maybe you guys are going out on a family event. Maybe you're going to the temple or the synagogue or the mosque or the church or something like this. And maybe you're hanging out with your family and you guys are all going to go out to this mosque or synagogue or this church, and then afterwards you're going to go out to eat and have some kind of family event together. And maybe you go with your family, and maybe you go do these things. Perhaps it's up to you whether you do these things, but your mind just needs to get to the point to get rid of wrong observances that you know with 100% certainty these things aren't leading to improvement to the condition of the mind in the life because it's not producing wisdom. Maybe you sit in the church pew and you sing the songs because maybe that's what you did when you were a child growing up and you like to just kind of hang out with your family and spend time with everybody. Maybe you sing the songs and the things like that. That's a choice for you to make. But if your mind understands, yeah, at the end of the day, I need to be able to cultivate wisdom. I need to be able to train the mind. That's what's going to lead to improvement. Then you've eliminated this wrong observance. Okay? So that's a little bit to help you there. So belief does not lead to wisdom, and it doesn't lead to awakening the mind to enlightenment. An individual needs to be able to see this through the development of their practice. The Buddha says this very clearly in his teachings. There are no auspicious or superstitious aspects to the path to enlightenment. He says it very clearly, and you'll be able to see this to be true yourself. The goal and objective on the path is to acquire wisdom. That's what's going to transform the mind's ignorance or this unknowing of true reality. And that's happening through independent verification of the teachings. That's why I start from the very beginning of all my classes and retreats and courses with saying, don't believe anything about what you see me talk about or hear me talk about, what you read in the books that I write. Don't believe anything because you need to get to wisdom in order to be able to transform the mind. So never believe anything at all. Okay. So any questions here on what we're sharing so far? No questions? Okay. So now the way that you're going to know that this wrong behavior and observances have been eliminated is that you'll deeply understand and be able to explain right speech, right action, and right livelihood. Because in order to be able to practice it, you're going to need to know it intellectually. You're going to have needed to reflect on it, and you're going to be practicing it on a day-to-day basis. So you'll be able to understand it deeply, and you'll actually even be able to explain it. If somebody asked you about it, you'd be able to explain it. You have fully developed and be practicing right speech, right action, and right livelihood flawlessly for 1 year, a minimum of 1 year. You'll see that you'll be able to practice that. And as you're practicing it, it becomes effortless. As you're making your way to that, it becomes challenging, right? When you're saying jokes and you're talking with people, you're going to see that you're going to trip up on this stuff. It's going to happen. But slowly but surely, you can work towards practicing this moral conduct. And that's why the mental discipline section of the Eightfold Path is there, to be able to help you be able to practice the moral conduct. Just understanding the moral conduct, you wouldn't actually be able to practice it because there's still craving in there, motivating your unwise decisions. So if you're having challenges in your moral conduct, make sure you're paying attention to the mental discipline section of your meditation and practicing mindfulness and practicing right effort. That's what's going to help you to improve your moral conduct, is the mental discipline section. And this is where I think the Buddhist teachings really excel, because you'll see moral conduct in a lot of collection of teachings, but it's just kind of like, here's some rules or here's some commandments to follow. But the Buddha is actually giving you the tools to be able to eradicate the things that are motivating the unwise moral conduct, because there's craving, anger, and ignorance in the mind, these pollutions that are motivating the unwise moral conduct. So you need the mental discipline to be able to help you to eradicate those pollutions, which will then make it easier for you to then practice the moral conduct. So if you're having challenges, if you're having challenges with your moral conduct, then look to the mental discipline section as well. If you've intellectually understood and you've committed it to memory what the moral conduct is, what's wise and unwise, and you're still having issues, then make sure you're looking at your mental discipline. Are you meditating with breathing mindfulness meditation each day, 2 or 3 times a day? Are you practicing loving kindness meditation? Are you practicing singleness of mind, focusing on one single object at a time? Are you practicing mindfulness where you're looking over the mind and aware of what's going on in your own mind? Are you applying right effort to eliminate unwholesome qualities and cultivate wholesome qualities? That's what's going to help you to practice the moral conduct. And remember, the moral conduct isn't rules or commandments. It's showing you the cause and effect relationship between the decisions you're making through your moral conduct and the results that you're experiencing. Whenever you experience unwholesome results in your day-to-day life, you can look at your moral conduct and see that you are making some unwise decisions. So you need to be able to root all that out and more bring in this moral conduct, because that's what's going to improve your mind and your relationships as well. Then the way that you'll know that wrong observances has been eliminated is it'll be impossible for you to acknowledge any rite, ritual, ceremony, or worship as being useful to attain enlightenment. Again, whether you choose to do these things, hanging out with the family or what have you, that's a whole separate thing. That's a choice for you to make. But by the time somebody has deeply seen the truth on these teachings and independently verified dependent origination and see that the number one problem is the lack of wisdom, the ignorance or unknowing of true reality, they will know with 100% certainty that there's no rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship that could ever lead to improvement in the condition of the mind. Again, whether you do those things with your family or not, that's a question for you to make, or a decision for you to make. But your mind, you'll know with 100% certainty, yeah, these things don't lead to enlightenment, but I'm maybe just kind of hanging out with my family here. And I'm just singing these songs and having a good old time because we're just spending time as a family. Okay, so any questions on how to know that you've eliminated wrong behavior and observances? Yes, sir.
Thank you, David. Just on the wrong observances, I feel like kind of in the direction also of, well, I think in terms of worship, it also goes into rituals, having certain symbols. I'm wondering if there is, or to me, it seems like there is a way to look through these things and still do them and kind of use them as well. Like, for example, you have a Dharma wheel on your wall. Mm-hmm. Some people who don't know, they will come in, oh, this is a place of worship. Mm-hmm. But I see that the Dharma wheel is reminding me of the Eightfold Path. Mm-hmm. And in the same way, like you just said, okay, I can go to church, I can sing the songs because I know singing songs is something that is actually good for my body. It brings vibration into the body.
It's on.
Oh, it's on, yeah.
It's just the singing.
And it is a way to connect with my community. So you have certain rituals that are strengthening the community, but it's good to look through them and know what's actually behind that and that they have a purpose. And I should make sure that I stay on the path of enlightenment and know what is actually helping on that, so it can actually support me in my practice in the end. Would you say that is a way to look at it?
Yeah, you can look at it that way, that it's like, okay, well, maybe there are these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, and maybe people do those things, and I'm choosing to sing these songs with this group because it's a bonding experience for us to kind of spend some time together and singing songs, and it's fun and it's enjoyable to sing songs with other people. But you need to know at the end of the day, what am I really after here? What am I really looking to do? And it's cultivate wisdom, making wise decisions, training my mind, disciplining my mind. And there's no amount of singing songs that's going to do that. But it doesn't mean that you don't do it, because it's an enjoyable activity that you like to do. Or it doesn't mean you don't go with your family to the church or synagogue or mosque. There's no harm in you doing that, right? The Buddha's not trying to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing. He's just helping you to be able to see that in order to get to enlightenment, your mind needs to understand what is the number one problem. It's the lack of wisdom, the unknowing of true reality. And what solves that? The cultivation of wisdom. And there's no amount of rituals or ceremonies that's going to do that for you. So the mind needs to get to that understanding and be able to see what is our true goal here. And that's where wrong behavior and observances being in the mind is going to hinder an individual from being able to experience the peace and joy. Because if somebody was practicing wrong behavior, they're putting out unwholesome moral conduct, and all that's going to be coming back to them by way of harm. And if someone's out there doing rituals and ceremonies thinking that this is somehow going to improve your life, then you're not doing what you need to do, which is cultivate wisdom. So as long as these pollutions are in the mind, you can't get to the first stage of enlightenment, because the mind's going to still be experiencing harm, and it's still not cultivating wisdom in order to be able to improve one's life and the condition of their mind. Yep.
Why this word observances is sort of sticking with me because it's like I'm observing. I mean, I can understand observe that this is not working, but why doesn't it just say, wrong belief or
the word? Sometimes students like to do that. Why isn't it this way? Why isn't it this way? I want it to be this way. I want it to be that way. This is the words that are shared because sometimes people, it's not just rituals and ceremonies. There's certain observances that people have. Like for example, like here in Thailand, they think that in order for, when someone dies, they think in order for this person to have a great afterlife, that we need to keep the body in the house for 3 days after they die, a minimum of 3 days. And they will have a refrigerated coffin come to the house and the body will be sitting there in the house. And now they're observing this cultural protocol. It's an observance rather than an actual ritual or ceremony. So this word observance is more encapsulating than just a ritual or a belief. There's more that it encompasses than just a ritual or a ceremony or things like that. Okay. All right. So I don't see any questions. Let me just check online, see if we have anything online here. Okay, I don't see any questions in our online platforms. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're actually going to break for lunch. As I mentioned to you guys, we usually break a little bit early for lunch. It's working out just like normal. We usually finish up around 11:30. And normally we take excursions, but on the last day, we don't take an excursion. We take an hour and a half lunch break. And then when we come back, I'm going to share some more with you guys. What I'm going to be teaching you guys is first, we're going to do the meditation of realized non-self, because you can practice that again, get some more experience with that. But then I'm going to teach you how to determine if you've attained the first stage of enlightenment. There's teachings for you to help understand that. Then I'm going to teach you how to integrate the teachings into your day-to-day life. I'm going to teach you continued support on the path to enlightenment, how to actually get that, because nobody's gotten to the first stage of enlightenment in 5 days. And then I'm going to have an open discussion where just any and all questions that you'd like to ask about anything and everything, whether it's something we've been talking about here or something else, you can ask anything and everything. So enjoy your lunch, and I'll see you guys at 1 o'clock. Okay. Thank you guys so much. Okay.